Good morning, and yet again, a parcel motel. yeah, I picked something else up today. It's a little bit later than normal. It's Thursday. I'm feeling a bit tired, getting towards the end of the week. And I ordered basically a notebook, I suppose, hardback notebook, Forbes, A6, sorry, A5, not A6, A5, half the size of A4, 200 and odd pages, lined in red with gold lettering, which have my name on them. So I got two. I think there's I can't remember why now. I think there was a special deal on. They weren't really expensive, even with the customization. Took a bit longer because of the customization, but not much longer, maybe a day or two than if I had it just without anything. I could have got black. I like the look of red. Gold on red. There's something, I don't know, it looks... I'm thinking of something to do with the Chancellor of the Exchequer in the UK government and his little red box with all the important financials in it. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of, but I think it looks quite nice and quite unusual, and hopefully with my name on it, no one's going to steal them. But anyhow, just coming up to the Beijing turn again, my favourite U-turn in the whole world. So what I'm going to talk about today, I was feeling a bit tired today, taking a little bit longer getting out of the house. I got a good sleep. I can't really complain about the sleep. I just feel like I could have done with some more. And I'm usually pretty good getting up, and I was pretty good this time. But a couple more hours would have been absolutely divine. So maybe Saturday now, I'll have a lie until about 9:30. That's in the morning, by the way. And we'll see how that goes. Right, so on the subject of tiredness, I'm just going to have a drink of my coffee. Just hold on a second. I didn't forget my travel mug today. That was not going to happen. I was definitely not going to forget it. Tiredness. Thinking about in the 90s when I was working, and I've mentioned it many, many times in many episodes. When I was pretty young, I was in my 20s. Pretty much do whatever the company said, I think. I went wherever they told me to go. I'd know, if they said to me in the morning, you go into wherever, in the afternoon, Holland or something or whatever, I would go. Obviously, I wasn't married, I didn't have any kids, anything like that. And I'd like to say that I found that travelling exciting. I think I was probably more daunting than exciting at the time. And looking back, it was fantastic. And I think I did really well, considering the background that I came from, that nobody in my family travelled. I think my grandfather did, and I've probably mentioned him before in other podcasts, but other episodes. But my immediate family, we didn't go on summer holidays. I'd never flown before. Hadn't been to the usuals like Spain or anything like that. Even though it was quite popular when I was growing up to go to Spain. Some people go in every year, which is fine. So I did a lot of work, and a lot of it was in the UK. Obviously, with the company being based in the UK. A lot of it was around the Norfolk area. There was some in Scotland, some in Wales. Went to a factory in Wales, Abergavenny. That was just quite nice. And in Scotland as well, the Firth of Forth, that was nice. And I think maybe for another day I'll have a chat about Scotland. It is a place that I love to visit. I haven't been recently. Maybe I'll add it to the list of places I'm going to be visiting in a much more, shall we say, relaxed, luxurious fashion as opposed to working, because a lot of my travelling has been around work. I don't travel as much with work these days, which in some ways is a good thing, because who likes work anyway? But anyway, going back to, so it was in the 90s, about 20 odd years ago, and there was a lot of work on, an awful lot of work, and I think I've mentioned before that it was chicken. People were eating a lot more chicken. I think people were more conscious of the food they was eating, and being a low-fat food. And maybe to this day, it's pretty much the go-to food for if you're thinking of reducing the carbs, reducing your fat intake, all that sort of stuff. It's very bland, of course. Chicken's maybe not as bland as turkey, but it's pretty bland, and you need to spice it up with stuff, with sauces and seasonings, and then maybe that's where the problems start. And a lot of seasonings revolve around salt, even though I think the sodium and blood pressure study has now been widely discredited in the medical community. You're meant to make sure you don't have too much sodium in your diet, I suppose, like anything. And a lot of sauces, they're very carb heavy. And that's that's straight on the old. Well, if you're a man, definitely straight on the old stomach if you have too many too many carbs. So I was very busy, and I remember one period in time where I worked for I think over 50 days, nearly 2 months without a day off, pretty much no downtime. I think it was about 52 days. I've still got the diaries somewhere. I think I said before, I don't Google really if I can help it, but I definitely might make the effort and pull out these diaries and have a shove this as to when it was. But I've been working as an engineer, I think, for a couple of years, and I was the sort of engineer they liked, because a lot of the guys were electricians. They were good at the, shall we say, the spanner work and the cabling work, but when it came to programming the computers, configuring the computers, there was only so much they could do. Where I was, I was pretty good on computers and communications and all the rest of it. So I could do anything, whether it was the box end label inside of the business that would involve Unix servers, data capture units, networks, and things like that. Later, the head ends became industrial PCs and stainless steel boxes, and then there was the weighing and grading of the chickens, which is heavily mechanical and electrical, but with a bit of programming as well, And so I was basically one of the engineers they could send to any job, and that's not always a good thing, because I was. And over a period of nearly 2 months, I didn't have a single day off. Now, there's all sorts of reasons why weekend work and out of hours work was part of the role. Obviously, these factories, some of them did work 24/7, but obviously that was the only time you could get at the equipment, whether it was to maintain or add new equipment would be the weekend. So yeah, it was heavily an out of hours job as well, and you was pretty much on call all the time. That you could be called upon at any time. I've had a couple of Sunday afternoons I've been called to I remember getting called to a factory. There was a problem with one of the warehouses, one of the IBM RS6000s was having issues, and I pretty much worked all night and all the next day as well, with probably about half an hour's sleep in the car, which, it'd probably be illegal. Yeah, it is illegal now, as is working, I think, 50 odd days, I think, is probably going to be illegal now. There's a regulation, which I'll talk about in a moment. But, so I worked for 52 days, and it didn't go unnoticed by the company. That didn't make it any better. I remember, I think it was the Friday afternoon, and it was the 52nd day, and I'm just thinking about this, I wasn't in Scotland. I can see the factory. I think it was one of the Bernard Matthews factories in is it Great Witchingham? I think that's where it could have been. And I'm not saying there's any any culpability or liability on behalf of Bernard Matthews. They had no idea that I'd been working that much. But there was an issue, or there was something that needed doing, and it involved another day's work, and I remember calling my manager and saying, this needs doing, and he says to me, well, you're going to have to stay another day. And it was this weird feeling of, only having worked for over 50 days, and this awful crushing feeling that, it was only another day, another overnight, and that was it, but it was horrible. It was a horrible feeling, and I remember that to this day, and I wouldn't want anybody to go through that. It wasn't manually taxing work over those 50 days. I did obviously get sleep, and I did have evenings where I didn't work, and intellectually, mentally, for some might have been difficult. For me, I didn't find it particularly hard in that sense, but it was too much. It was way too much without a day off. I can't remember exactly what happened, but I think I did whatever I had to do, and I left, after the job had been done. And then I got the weekend off, which was fantastic. Unfortunately, it was probably mostly resting and doing nothing. And I remember taking holidays and stuff and feeling like I don't know what to do here, what we're meant to do when I'm not working. It was a strange feeling to be in, and not a good one either. So the company, I think it's the Monday in the office the next week, and the directors were worried. They were worried, not for me and not for my welfare. But they were worried that I might be in an accident, and it doesn't have to be one in the workplace. I could have been driving around the next day, I could have been driving home from site, and they were worried there would be some legal implications, that I might be sued. that they might have not from me, but from the powers that be, shall we say. I think there's definitely a duty of care, and the director's been, really responsible for the company, the legal entity. So a couple of the directors, they had a big concern, and they said, we're going to have to do something here. We're going to have to stop this happening. At the time, I don't think there was a hard and fast regulation in place by the government, so there wasn't exposed in that sense. But if anything would have happened to me, there could be anywhere traced back to tiredness, anything like that, they'd be in trouble. So it took them another 50 odd days, and this is sort of very sad in many ways. And I worked for another 50 odd days before they implemented a system whereby it wouldn't happen again. And I think I'm very lucky that I didn't have an accident. I was very stupid thinking back to have worked that amount of days without a day off. You sort of want to do the right thing, you want to work as hard as possible. I was young, I did find it difficult, shall we say, to respond sometimes to authority when they're telling you to do something that maybe you shouldn't be doing. And I relied a bit too much on them for my personal well-being, and they've maybe not been the best. They didn't have my interests at heart, and even when they brought in this rule that you could only work so long without having a day off, and it was a sort of a funny rule in a sense that you could still work quite a long period of time, 3 weeks or something, without any days off, but you would be entitled to days off then, equivalent to whatever days. And it wasn't the same as weekends. You didn't get 2 days off for every 5 days you worked, but it was better than it had been, and it was enforced, and it was a step in the right direction, I'll give them that. But I think it was a period in my life when I was young, I wanted to work hard, I wanted to do well. I was the best engineer they've ever had, there's no doubt about that. The most hardworking, and I'm almost embarrassed to say that I shouldn't have done those hours. That was completely, and it was me. I should have had some responsibility there, but I was young, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there, maybe some of them listening to this, who are young, and young, you don't have to be 19, you can be in your 30s, who are young, and you want to do well, you want to work hard. This is how we're brought up in lots of parts of society, to work hard, do your job, be on time, do the hours, do more hours. It looks good if you do. I certainly didn't get rewarded sufficiently for the time I worked, but it was a great lesson. It was a great experience in some ways, and in some ways I know my limits. I know the warning signs, and I know if I'm working too hard and if I'm doing too much. And it isn't a nice feeling. And I think if you're young, maybe it creeps upon you a little bit more subtly. As you get older, maybe because you've had it before, maybe because you're getting older, when you're working too hard. So my feeling is now it is better now. In Europe, we have working time regulation. As far as I'm aware, there isn't the equivalent in the US. I'm familiar with some of the regulations in the US, and there's less, I think, protection for workers, especially people working in the tech, and where you might not be doing manual labour necessarily. And I do know people that work long hours. They don't record their hours because they're in a certain, shall we say, job level, because they're salaried, whatever. They don't get overtime money or anything like that. And I do know people in the industry who work 100 hours a week, over 60 hours a week, and that's illegal, and they shouldn't be doing it. And I certainly, if I come across anybody who's doing it, I'll tell them. I have no hesitation. So in Europe, we have what's called the Working Time Act regulation. It was brought in to address the issue of people working very long hours, without sufficient rest. Suggesting a few hours sleep is sufficient rest is wrong, and that's not good to anybody when you're working hard. And I'm certainly not in an industry, and never have been in an industry where I will be physically fatigued, really. Or even mentally fatigued to a certain extent, apart from the long hours that can happen. So it was a good thing to come in, and it protects the most vulnerable workers, I think. Now, I would speak up because, I know the law, that's the one thing, and I know the warning signs, I know what it's like, and how it feels, and it's dangerous. And so the working time regulations, essentially, you can work up to 45 hours a week, which I think is too much. Me personally, for most of my working life, my working week has been 37 and a half hours, and that's too much. It needs to be less. A lot of the working day, this 8-hour day, 7.5-hour day, whatever, came about, I think, over 100 years ago, and it literally was a case of somebody dividing the day up, the 24 hours, by 3. 8 hours to sleep, 8 hours to work, and 8 hours just to do your own thing, and I think in this day and age, we have so much technology, we have so much machinery, we have robots, we shouldn't be using these to push our productivity through the roof. We should be using these so we get some quality free time in our lives, so we get time with our families and our friends, that we get time to relax, that we get time to enjoy life, because it's finite, and it goes, and it won't take the company long to replace you if you was to die suddenly. So just bear that in mind. I appreciate you want to do well, you want to do the right thing, but also think of yourself and think of what it's doing to you and your family if you're under that sort of pressure, or you feel you are, or you feel you have to. You really don't have to. You really don't have to work those hours.